Hello, and welcome to another Half Pint session. And today I am joined by a returning guest to the Half Pint sessions, Sarah Arthur. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Hello. I realize it's midday for me here in Michigan, so I have water, as they say. So I'm just gonna do a little sip.
Well, this is actually non-alcoholic beer. One of our
Mm.
patron
Mhm.
supporters, his son works for Best Day Brewing, and they do a
Ooh,
load of non-alcoholic beers. And on the podcast, we've been having to record really early because Andrew and particularly Matt's schedules haven't allowed for later recordings. So
right,
I wasn't
right,
going to give up drinking beer on the podcast because that's kind of our thing, but I couldn't do that
right.
at 8 a.m. in the morning.
No, no, no. I imagine, and then like Lewis, you'd have to go light for Lent anyway, coming
Hey,
up.
the medievals did a beer fast, not fasting from beer, but they would have nothing but beer during Lent. So I might bring it back. We'll see. We'll see. I need to speak to my spiritual director about that. I'm not quite sure if he'll be on board.
Yes, right. The one who meets you at the pub.
For spiritual direction. Well,
Spiritual. Oh yeah, right. Not spirits. Spirits.
yes. Well, for those who didn't see your previous appearance, who are you?
I am Sarah Arthur, and on a previous Half Pint, you and I discussed the annual Northern Michigan C.S. Lewis Festival, which has been going on for over 20 years now, up in what was my hometown of Petoskey, Michigan. And yeah, we can chat about that again. But I'm also an author and have focused a lot on the writings of the Inklings, and now have tomorrow my debut young adult novel will be making its way into the world. So, Once a Queen, we're excited.
Wonderful. Well, we'll talk about Once a Queen in a moment. Let's just fill out a few more details about this Michigan festival. When is it? Who have you had to speak in the past? What could people expect if they turned up?
Yeah. So my husband Tom and I were living in Petoskey, like I said, about 20 years ago when a film producer by the name of David Krause came to us with wondering if he could screen or do a film screening of his PBS film, The Magic Never Ends, which was about Lewis's conversion to Christianity. And what he didn't know in arriving at the church where my husband and I worked at the time, to ask us about the screening was that he was meeting two people who are really, really excited about C.S. Lewis. And so instead of being like, let's have a screening, we were like, let's do a festival. And so David Krause and the Arts Council and the local schools and numerous churches and even restaurants and galleries all got together in this little town in northern Michigan to start an annual celebration of the writing and life of C.S. Lewis, writings. And it's been going strong ever since. So guests in the past we've had Philip Yancey, Douglas Gresham, and Boskamp, numerous scholars, Lewis scholars who would be familiar to your listeners, including Diana Glyer. And yeah, it's been amazing. We have the people who are part of the Wade Center at Wheaton College. David and Crystal Downing are on the board. So the caliber of speakers it's wonderful. It's been so great.
Wonderful. Well, there'll also be the links in the show notes to that so people can find out more. But let's now talk about your previous writing prior to this book, because this book is a little bit of a departure. What have you written up until now?
Up until now, I have published 12 nonfiction books that have really focused on that space of the intersection of faith and great stories. So it began, I had been in full time youth ministry in northern Michigan, in Petoskey, and I had been an English major. So I wasn't like your normal pick for a youth director at a big church. Had to, learn how to play paintball, for instance. But my instincts were to engage teenagers in conversations about spiritual themes in the stuff that interested them. So, Lord of the Rings films in theaters, perfect opportunity to talk about Tolkien's faith, his influence on C.S. Lewis, and just really, those conversations were so enriching that my very first books then, when I stepped away from full-time ministry to pursue writing, were all about that. So I did one called Walking with Frodo, a devotional journey through the Lord of the Rings, and subsequent books similar to that. But then made the turn towards some more serious engagement with faith and literature. I did some anthologies with Paraclete Press of readings for the church year that pulled from classic and contemporary fiction and poetry by people of faith and people of no faith whose writings probe the depth of our human experience. So I did that, and then wrote a spiritual biography of Madeleine L'Engle, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time. And for many readers, she kind of stands in a similar stream as a person of faith, writing for kind of a larger, more popular audience. A similar stream to Lewis, I would say, in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was my wife that made me read Madeleine L'Engle for the first time when she was horrified that I hadn't read it before. It's literally the next book that we did.
Hooray. Oh,
Yes,
good.
exactly. This is
Yeah.
why you get married. You get told what to read.
Yeah, because otherwise, you just, I do feel like in marriage, our literary experiences are greater than the sum of their parts, right? Like it starts to become this thing. 27, almost 27 years for my husband and I, and he's now a
Since you
pastor.
joined libraries.
Yes, we join libraries. Our 13-year-old and 10-year-old boys are avid readers. So yeah.
Well, let's talk about your upcoming book. This
Ooh,
is an early print version.
yes. The
And this is a
advanced reader
book
copy.
which,
And this is, I would
ooh,
say, unboxing, and this is what what she'll look like
that's
when
way prettier.
she arrives in mailboxes tomorrow.
Well, this is a book that some people have described as Sarah Arthur's love letter to great children's literature, full of intrigue and wonder, sure to enchant the imagination of a new generation of young adults.
Who said that? Someone I
Oh,
know said
sorry,
that.
I don't know. Apparently, they're a podcaster. People should definitely listen to whatever he says.
Yeah, it's that. Oh, the guy from Pints with Jack, that guy, that David Bates guy.
Matt Bush.
So kindly read it. I just was really honored by that endorsement. Thank you, David.
I'll say anything for a free book. Well, can you give us a little bit of a synopsis, or at least as much of a synopsis as you think readers should get before diving into the book itself?
Sure. Well, the idea for this story came to me 20 years ago now, which is hard for me to believe. But it began as a supposal, which is a phrase I borrow from C.S. Lewis, where I began to wonder, okay, so if characters like, the children in E. Nesbit's stories, or characters from fairy tales that go into other worlds and return, they don't stay children. They grow up in our world. And what happens to them? And what happens to their children and their grandchildren? What if they never get to return to the worlds where they had adventures and maybe became someone special? And what if in our world, as they returned, they just had to be ordinary again and experience the ordinary tragedies that we do as human beings, and there isn't like this wonderful resolution, and they conquered evil and lived happily ever after. So I have a 14-year-old protagonist, Eva, from the United States. She comes to England to meet her grandmother, her British grandmother, for the very first time. And so the couple mysteries are: why the estrangement between Eva's parents and her grandmother? And why does grandmother have such a cold and aloof personality by day? Very resistant to any notion of like the wonder of fairy tales or magic or anything. But by night, she seems to have this change, where the worlds of fairy tale and the possibilities of magic are very much alive to her. And so that's Eva's adventure. Why these broken people around me as grown-ups? And do I have a role in helping them heal. Can they heal? And what's going on? So that's a
Lovely.
summary.
Well, obviously there are some Lewisian influences in there, but
Mm.
what were the other things that influenced you as you were writing? Because I detected notes of, a few other Inklings and their friends.
Yes, definitely Inklings and their friends. So there is a character who is a professor, was a professor, and I wanted my professor to be a woman, and so she is based loosely on Dorothy Sayers, of course. So I needed that because it's told in Eva's point of view as a 14-year-old American. She's very, and what she doesn't know, we also don't know as the readers. And so I needed a kind of authorial voice or authoritative voice that you get from fairy tale, where you have a very strong narrator who knows what's going on and is able to articulate things to you. So I have some of those, Inklings notes in there. Obviously, echoes of Tolkien, in that sense of there's some pretty high stakes. We're not sure exactly what, but there's some high stakes to what's going on, that will impact Eva's sense of who she is and how she moves forward. And of course, there's Secret Garden in there. You have to have a manor house,
Mm-hmm.
on the edge of some sort of moor. And the character has to meet a gardener and other staff who know what's going on and, are the ones that are either preserving the secrets of the house or helping the main character navigate those secrets. There's E. Nesbit in there with, sort of largish families of siblings. Some are believers, some aren't, in other worlds and the possibility of magic. So and I can't forget, if your readers have not yet discovered The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge, this was a huge influence on J.K. Rowling, actually. So Little White Horse is another one where the character arrives at a manor house, by night and wakes up and wants to explore and find out what's going on with this family.
That was a very stable part of pretty much any story I was read as a child. I remember there would always be some large house and usually some secret
Always.
behind it that you
Always.
don't find out. Great.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even, there's bits of George MacDonald in there, right? I mean, you have I as Eva is exploring Carrick Hall, her grandmother's estate, I so wish I could have fit in a moment where she goes up and up and up and up and finds grandmother, weaving or something in a room. But, I needed to also it be in the mid-90s, right? So that's what I had to do.
So, what is the expected age of a child reading this? Because I know with this sort of literature, it's very difficult to sort of pitch who exactly this is for.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is a guideline?
Yeah. Sometimes I get a little grumpy about this. I feel like Madeline L'Engle, who was asked this question as she was pitching A Wrinkle in Time to different
Mm-hmm.
publishers. And they were like, well, who's it for? And she said, it's for people. Don't people read books? Um, but, the publishing world likes to, have categories. And so at different times when this book was in the hands of different publishers for review, it was a middle grade novel, right? Because my characters are a bit on the younger side for young adult. My main character is 14. So middle grade tends to be that, like the 8 to 12-year-old space, where it's kind of it's adventures, right? It's not so much character formation over time. Some of it is, but it's really the adventure that hooks you in. And so it was that for a while. But I was not as interested in the adventure part of it as I was in the relationships, this multi-generational secret and what Eva, the minefield of that for Eva, which to me feels like young adulthood, right? Like you're 14, 15, and you're starting to wake up to the fact that the grownups around you are possibly broken in some way. They're carrying wounds from past experiences, tragedies, traumas, and you're beginning to try to figure out if this is like normal, or am I in part like responsible for some of this, right? Because teens tend to think I did something wrong, that the adults around me would act this way. So because that really became and has always been the focus of the story, eventually it became it's now as a genre in young adult, um, which is less a reader category by age as it is its own genre. And it was Sarah Mackenzie of the Read Aloud Revival who really convinced me of that. Not everybody has a taste for young adult, and even my book doesn't quite fit perfectly in that category. It's not necessarily issues driven, it's much more about those multi-generational relationships.
Hmm.
So 14, maybe young teen. If there was a young teen category, this book would be it.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's probably what I'd have put it in as well. As someone that grew up with Kevin from the Wonder Years, he was just
Oh,
a little bit ahead of me when it was airing in the UK, and
yes.
so his
Yeah,
world was
yeah.
familiar enough, but also alien enough that
Mm.
I was intrigued as to what was going to happen next in my life, and so I got to experience it vicariously through him.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it's a tough category because you're not 14 or 15 for very long, but there's a
Hmm.
lot that happens, 12, 13, 14, 15. You're beginning to turn your face towards adulthood, but you're not, like, at least for some of the teens I've worked with in 30 years in youth ministry and my own 13-year-old, you're not quite ready yet to give up the things that you loved as a kid. And of course, the Inklings are the ones who, you know, have taught many of us that you don't have to.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't have to.
Well, I mean, aside from entertainment, did you have a particular goal in mind with this book? What is it that you're hoping that readers will grapple with? The generational relationship seems to be a large part of it.
It is very much a large part of it. And I think that it grew as the book developed. Sometimes my themes emerge rather than like setting out with a theme. But I also I felt it was important to spend some time thinking about um, the influences that we've had from other writers, other field fairy tale fantasy authors. What are some of the gaps or the unanswered questions that are fun to kind of follow, right? Like the rabbit trails that they've left for us. And I felt it was important to, again, that question of like, okay, so a child has had adventures, magical adventures, and now they're back in the ordinary world and they grow up. And what happens, right? That supposal. And what if my answer to that question is different than what I experienced reading from some of these other stories? What if this is a chance for me. It's my own story, right? It's my chance to maybe argue with some of those authors a little bit, maybe push a little bit in areas where they just maybe made a decision and just moved on, right? And didn't really think through the repercussions of what they were leaving their character with. I think of E. Nesbitt's kids, those families of kids. Like, I would love to be a fly on the wall in their home when they were like their grandparents with their own children and grandchildren. Like, what would they be talking about together? What? How do you recover from adventures that you don't get to have again? Right? I don't know. All of that. So.
I love it. Do you have any other future projects of this sort of genre?
Yeah, well, this book is now the first in a series. So Once a Queen is the first of three, at least, from Waterbrook, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. I am currently writing Once a Castle, and my own kids are at school right now. But man, I am right with you, David. uh, so sweet. Yeah, so Once a Castle is next, and hopefully that will be the goal is to release one a year, which feels slightly heroic. uh yeah, we'll see what happens. And then third book, Once a Crown.
So, where can people go to find out more about the book, your writing, and the launch?
Yes, it is launch week, so lots of exciting things going on. A great place to start is saraharthur.com, especially if you go to events. That's all there. But there's still time, I believe, for people to pre-order if we get this out in time. And there's some fun perks with that on my website. But also, we're going to have a virtual book birthday party tomorrow night, Tuesday, January 30th. So for some people, it might be today already when they hear about it, from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern in Zoom. And all of that, you can find that info under the events page on my website, saraharthur.com. And I have some special guests who will be there, in fact, who have graciously said yes. One of them is my excellent host right now, David Bates, who will be judging, our esteemed judge for the fun-loving British accent contest, which will wrap up the virtual book birthday party. I'm going to be live broadcasting the event from the English Inn here in mid-Michigan, where there is legitimately a huge painting of a white stag on the stairway landing. And so, of course, if I was going to host it from there, I needed somebody with expertise to judge the British accent contest. So, and I have several people, including teenagers, who have agreed to be contestants to kind of like get everyone excited, and then hopefully other people will join in too.
Judging people's accents. That's what I do.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so I had the really amazing opportunity to participate in and narrate part of the audiobook. And it wasn't the American like narrator part. That's what I was expecting. They wanted me to narrate the excerpts from my fictional fairy tales in between the chapters as Clifton, who wrote them, with a British accent. Which was super intimidating. Thankfully, the director is married to somebody who's British. And so she, periodically would be like, can you land that last sentence just a little differently? It's weekend. It's not the weekend. It's weekend. So, oh, anyway. But I'm not going to enter the contest. I didn't want to,
Got to give
make
the
it
kids
hard
a chance.
for you. But you could sweep things if you really wanted to be a contestant instead. I'm just saying.
Well, Alexander's English accent is coming along quite nicely.
Oh, fantastic.
I came back with him. We were picking up some things for his mother, and his mum said, did you have a good time at the store? And he went, no, mummy, not store, shops.
Shops. That's right. That's right, buddy. Shops.
Raising them well.
That's so great.
Well, Sarah, thanks for this. There'll be links to everything in the show notes, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you. Can't wait.
And please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.